Hey, what's up? This is Kev from the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast, and you're listening to the BS Podcast Network. Enjoy the show.
In a world of ordinary fantasy football podcasts, ordinary guys rise up to bring you extraordinary analysis and entertainment. This is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts Kevin Cotillo, Sal Lito, and Stephen Marcus.
Blinded by the light, wrapped up like a douche, another runner in the night. Blinded by the light, wrapped up like a douche, another runner in the night. Blinded by the light.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today is Tuesday. It is September 26th, and this is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast, and I am starting to have a complex.
What's
Kevin
that?
Cotillo here. I am Kevin Cotillo, your host, but I keep losing someone here.
Who?
Can you guys not stand to be all together at once, or is it me? Is it something to do with me?
Listen, we've kept this up for a long time, but Sal and I are actually the same person.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't
Mind
know.
blown.
Exactly.
Mind blown.
It got so tiring. It got so tiring. We just can't do it anymore. So
Well, it's weird because you guys are so opposite. Like, you're so meek and fragile, and Sal's kind of like a rough and gruff kind of dude.
exactly. So together,
You
We
make
made-
one whole man.
exactly. Exactly. So yeah, we can't
Well,
be
welcome
seen
back.
in the same place anymore or heard
Wel-
in the same place anymore.
Welcome back, Steve. It's good to have you back. I appreciate you being on the show a lot more than Sal. So
No problem. Actually, I know you guys don't really believe that. It's true. That's not the case. Sal's big timed us tonight and
Yep.
went to go watch a professional podcast and recorded live.
listen, I can't really argue with him choosing Matthew Berry over us. It is
I don't
good for
either.
him to see how someone who knows what they're doing is actually doing it.
That's true.
And maybe he'll bring some of that back, but probably not, because I think, I just don't think he's that talented.
Just things have trouble sticking.
Yeah, they have
at
a lot-
his
lot of
age,
trouble.
just in one ear out the other.
That's right. It is tough to remember things at his age. I will, talking about professionalism and all that, I do have to issue an apology. I'm going to apologize to, first and foremost, the listeners. I'll apologize to Sal, and I'll even apologize to you, Steve.
Thank you.
I screwed up on Sunday's episode. We forgot an entire game, and it's my fault. Look, I was in the sun a lot on Sunday. It was a very hot game. I feel as though I may have had some form of stroke, so I forgot an entire game. We did not talk very much at all about the Kansas City Chiefs.
Kareem
Really
Hunt
at all.
wants to say, what's up with that?
Yeah, we did mention Kareem Hunt. He did get a mention, and I believe Sal said we'd talk about him later, and then we never did. Look, we didn't really need to. There really wasn't a whole lot from that game, except that Kareem Hunt is still very, very good. So yeah.
What else needs to be said? Really?
I think we should have just said that and moved on. So I apologize to everyone for missing that game. We have a lot to cover in this particular episode, though. We are going to talk really briefly about the two games that we have not covered yet: the Raiders and Washington football team, and the Cowboys and the Cardinals also played. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into some news. We're going to get into some other items. But I want to start with this, Steve. Are you panicking if you have an 0-3 team at this point?
A little bit. I think.
Yeah?
I think it depends. Every 0-3 team is different, but I think you really need to look at the makeup of your team and really try to understand if it's somebody that is just having a rough start, maybe dependent on their schedule, or if it's someone that's just not being involved in their offense enough. I know I'm in a dynasty league. I've got what I thought was a huge dynamic core of wide receivers. I've got Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Kelvin Benjamin, Terrell Pryor, and Tyrell Williams. At the start of the season, having those 5 wide receivers, all of them potentially in a starting lineup at one time because it's a 3-flex league, you would have told me that you're pretty stacked.
What were they again? Go ahead. Let me hear them again.
Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Kelvin Benjamin, Terrell Pryor, and Tyrell Williams.
Okay.
Those 5
that's
guys.
pretty solid group.
This week they scored in a half-point PPR combined, all 5 of them, 18.5 points.
Ooh, that's ugly.
Brutal.
That's real ugly.
It is terrible. And so you have to look at these guys. I mean, currently Terrell Pryor, wide receiver 67 in that scoring format, half-point PPR. You've got Kelvin Benjamin at wide receiver 69. Nice. You got Tyrell Williams at wide receiver 62 and Amari Cooper at wide receiver 52. Mike Evans, the highest of all of them at 31, and he's only played 2 games. He's played an entire game less than them and is double their position rank. So you really have to pay attention, and you have to either hope that these guys are going to turn it around, or you have to really think if this team is something that you need to blow up, or you need to try and move and try and get anything that you can to get them off your team. I think that if you're 0-3, that the wheels have got to start turning. You got to start doing something to get your season turned around before it's too late.
So what do you do, though, with those particular guys? In my mind, I get it. If you're 0-3 with that team, it's because they're severely underperforming. But you should have, things should regulate, right? We've talked about this plenty of times before. Usually things come back to the mean. And those aren't guys that are older or, could have fallen off a cliff or anything like that. Obviously, aside from the Kelvin Benjamin injury, which we'll hopefully have some more information on as the week goes on, those guys should rebound, right? So are you trying to move them when their value is that low, or are you going to stand pat?
Well, that's the worst thing about it, is that you can't sell any of these guys when they're doing this bad. It's hard to sell somebody like an Amari Cooper at their value, which like you said, should be much higher than that when they just come off a week where they scored 1.1 points. So yeah, hopefully you stick with your guns with what you thought throughout the offseason, where you drafted somebody. There's a reason these guys were drafted as high or where they were. Kelvin Benjamin is someone that was drafted way lower. So, wide receiver 69 is a little bit low, but you're not going to expect him to jump up to a wide receiver 1. But in Amari Cooper, he's got the talent, and you think that he's got the opportunity to absolutely do something like that. So you have to play your cards. You have to know your league. You have to do what you can to try and get the value out of these guys. But if you've got a big name guy like this, and we've seen a lot of them underperform to start the season, Le'Veon Bell is a RB15 right now. These guys are going to inch their way back up to where they should be. So if you've got a good team that is, prominent guys in their offense, I think you do have to stand pat. But if you've got other guys that have been overperforming, I think it might be a good time to try and acquire one of these guys that might be underperforming early in the season.
So obviously, I believe you mentioned that was a dynasty league. So
yes.
Your opinions on the dynasty have to be a little bit different than in the redraft. I know in a dynasty league that I'm in, I kind of went all in for this year, tried to make some moves and collect a lot of assets that would put me in a position to be a contender. I am currently 0-3 and just outside of the. This is a league where you can get into the playoffs based on points as well as your record, and I'm outside the playoffs with points. Now, I looked at my roster today and I was like, all right, so maybe it's a dynasty I should dump for the future and start to rebuild. But then I looked at the team, and I really think that it's a team that can really compete. I have Andrew Luck, who I think will be coming back. It looks like he's going to be coming back week 6 now, is what the projections say. And it looks, and some of the other guys that I have, like you, haven't performed, and I can't give up on this team, even though I'm just outside of the playoffs right now, because I think at 0-3 with 10 weeks left in the regular season for fantasy, I think you have time. So and I think for me, my mindset with redraft is obviously the same. I think that there's some time. I think you got to wait a few more weeks, because if you start selling now, it's way too low. You're not going to get the value. You're not going to get a return. And unless you're doing things like, trying to dump off for some guys that have good keeper value if you're in a keeper league with keeper rules and things like that. Maybe that's the way you go, but I think you have to stay the course. I think, you have to stick with it and make moves where you can. Maybe you just need a change of scenery, but don't sell for less value for guys that are underperforming.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to do anything like that. But what do you do with guys that maybe are overperforming or someone that you might not expect to be in a top spot like they are? Like you've got Stephon Diggs in a half-point PPR or in full PPR as well. He's wide receiver 1. Are you trying to sell someone like him at what could be the peak of their value? I mean, you don't assume that he would end the season as wide receiver 1, but he's absolutely shown that type of talent and he's gotten that type of volume so far. So what are you doing with those types of guys like Michael Crabtree? He's also in the top 10 right now. And Adam Thielen, even he's in the top 10 or a wide receiver 1 in 12-team leagues.
To make a decision as to what you think the guy is going to do for the rest of the season. Personally, on Diggs, I think you're right. I think he ends up being a wide receiver 2 more than a wide receiver 1 when it comes to the end of the year. So same thing with Thielen and Diggs. I mean, Thielen and Crabtree. So if you can get wide receiver 1 value for those guys right now, I would do it in a heartbeat. But for the most part, I don't know that you're going to get that, right? No one's going to want to pay up for that value because everyone kind of feels the same way. There are some people out there that are thinking Diggs is a wide receiver 1. So sure, you want to target those people and try to make a move, maybe get a top tier running back or something along those lines. I think you should absolutely do it because in my mind, he's going to regress towards the norm and he'll be a wide receiver 2 by the end of the season. So I think you have to look for people like that and to make those kind of moves, but be selective about it because you might have some hard times finding someone that's going to think that he's going to remain there. And no one wants to get, obviously we know Marvin Jones last year, right, was the big story, right? First two weeks of the season, he was wide receiver number 1, not just a wide receiver 1, but
that's
the
what
number
Diggs
1
is right now.
Receiver,
Diggs is
right?
Wide receiver 1.
And then all of a sudden, he came crashing down because it turns out he's not actually a very good receiver. Now, I don't think that Diggs is going to have the same fate and come crashing all the way back to like a wide receiver 5, but I do think he will regress a little bit. And particularly, the other guy that you mentioned, Crabtree, I mean, he had a 3-touchdown game. That's not going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
He's probably going to end the season with 10 touchdowns, but at the end of the day, that's not going to propel him into a wide receiver 1.
So let me ask you then about a guy that should be near and dear to your heart after this weekend, Brandon Cooks. He finds himself as a wide receiver 6. He might be somebody that do you think he's going to end as high as he is right now? Or do you think he might be someone that has the clout on the offense? He's got Tom Brady throwing to him that might be able to get a little more return value than someone like Stephon Diggs.
So Cooks is a guy that I feel like, coming into this season, I thought he was a fringe wide receiver 1 anyway. I thought that he, was right around that 12 to 15 range before the season. So I think that, at wide receiver 6, do I think he's going to stay there? I think he has a chance to. I think there's a possibility that he might, but the probability is that no, he'll slip back towards that low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. So if someone's willing to pay the farm for him, it's possible that I would make that deal. But I'd have to get some really good value in return because I still think he is he's probably drafted. If he's on any of my rosters, he's been drafted as a wide receiver 1 because most likely I started off with a couple of running backs or a running back and then wide receiver and took him a little later because he thought there was value there. So he may be my wide receiver 1, but that means I'm solid at running back. So if I can get a guy like, I don't know, like an AJ Green, someone's looking to sell AJ Green because he started a little slower or something along those lines, sure, absolutely.
What about a Doug Baldwin?
Yeah, see, I would take Cooks over Baldwin.
What about this one might be a little too easy, Jordy Nelson?
Yeah, Jordy Nelson. I think I'd take Jordy Nelson. It's close for me, though, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm going to go with Jordy Nelson, and I think, but the injury makes me a little nervous because he's a guy that could get nicked up pretty much all season. And he could be off, he could be on, he could miss a couple of games. He's one that makes me a little nervous with already being a little injured in the season. So it's closer than you think with him because of that.
All right, my last one. What about a Des Bryant?
I take Cooks over Bryant all day, every day.
Interesting.
I mean, look, two. Well, we'll get into it, but 2 for 20 with a touchdown, right? If he doesn't get the touchdown in that game, he's useless.
I think it was 2 for 12.
2 for 12.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Even worse.
Yeah, he's useless if he doesn't get the score. Now, granted, he's going to get a touchdown,
Quite often.
on a regular basis. That's what he does. But
every other game,
he's still, he's going to stink every other game. And I mean, I think Cooks has the potential to stink every other game. But the games where he blows up, he's going to really blow up like he did this weekend.
Yep, makes sense.
So, all right. Let's get into some of the games here really quickly that went on Sunday night. It was the Oakland Raiders against the Washington football team, 27-10. The Washington pulls this one out. Your boy Kirk Cousins finally looked like Kirk Cousins.
That's right.
He goes for 365 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and looked good. Looked really good throwing the ball to Chris Thompson, who continues to impress somehow. Now, there's a guy. You talk about a guy that you would that I would sell. He is a guy that I would sell. If there's someone in your league that thinks Chris Thompson is a running back 1, you jump on that right now.
Listen, you are killing the value of my running back right now in Falafel. This guy is going to keep it up, and he is going to be a machine all year long. No, I have to agree. I think that he is a sell-high candidate. I mean, it does not seem that he can keep up this production. I love what he's done so far. I love him as a player. I hope that he gets the opportunity to continue doing this. He's a player that's battled a lot of injuries in his career, so I hope that he stays healthy. I hope we get to see a full season of production from him to see what he can do. But to think that he can keep this type of step up is it's kind of fool's gold. So, I mean, get what you can while you can.
They have to keep using him. Samaje Perine did not look good. 19 carries, 49 yards, and he fumbled again. So they're going to have to keep using him. Rob Kelly missed this one. Well, it looks like his injury is minor, and they're expecting him back this week. But just they're going to need Chris Thompson if Kelly's going to be hurt and Perine's going to keep fumbling. So another guy that we talked about early in the season was Vernon Davis. He played. Jordan Reed was out in this one. And Vernon Davis looked good, 558 and a touchdown. This is what he's going to do when Jordan Reed's out. So hopefully if you drafted Jordan Reed, you did take the late round pick and use it on Vernon Davis because you absolutely need to when you have that guy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In the few dynasty leagues that I drafted in this year where I got Jordan Reed, I spent my last pick on Vernon Davis. Heard Reed was ultimately going to be out, switched him out, and I got ultimate production out of Vernon Davis. Like you said, you read his stat line. He was productive. He looked good. And, if you've got a deep bench or a deep roster and you can afford to hold that extra tight end in this type of scenario, then it's going to pay off for you because Vernon Davis, although he's a little bit older, he's still a very productive tight end when he's on the field and when he's got the opportunity. So, yeah, they looked good. I think the bigger story in this game is how terrible Oakland looked.
Yeah, they were bad.
Terrible. We talked about Amari Cooper and how bad he was this week. Crabtree didn't look great. He had a few drops, and then he ended up leaving the game injured. Marshawn Lynch didn't look great. Derek Carr. Sal was all over Twitter wondering what on earth the Oakland game plan was this week, and it was to not show up at all. They did not show up for this game.
They took the night off, right?
Yeah.
That was really what it was.
They just didn't do anything. So, you put this one behind you, you move on to next week. Of course, they play Denver this week. So, this should be interesting.
Ooh, big one.
But
is there any bets going on?
As of right now, no, there are not. But Thursday night show, they might produce one. So, we'll have to see. Tune in for Thursday's show. There
you go. So a little what is it called? Foreshadowing? Teaser? Teaser? Nice work, Steve. Nice work.
Yep.
All right. Last night, the Dallas Cowboys took on the Arizona Cardinals and came out victorious, 28-17. It was nice for me. We'll start with the Arizona side of the ball, even though they lost. It was nice for me to see Carson Palmer finally do something and look somewhat effective. He looked a lot better than he has previously.
I would absolutely agree. There was some pressure on him, and he seemed to take it pretty well. He would step up in the pocket quite often. Sometimes he would get sacked, but sometimes he would buy himself a lot of extra time. Larry Fitzgerald, if anyone was worried about,
Ageless wonder.
yeah, he is so good. Just
He
so
is really good.
And he's the class of the NFL. Everything he does is perfect. He is what you want every NFL player to be, and he's damn good. So on top of everything, he is so good, and he's a PPR machine. This is why he was such a value in drafts. He's that good. He's the wide receiver to own in Arizona until he retires. And everyone else, you're picking at straws. So
yeah, Larry gets 13 for 149 and a touchdown in this one. Jerron Brown does get a touchdown after blowing up last week, but can't put too much together for yardage. Only 2 for 27. So I will say this: a lot of people were looking at the running backs coming into this game, how the split would be. Chris Johnson gets the start and the lead in carries with 12, but he only gets 17 yards. Andre Ellington got 5 carries, but he was more active in the passing game with 8 targets. And Kerwin Williams basically doing nothing. Looks like Chris Johnson's going to get the start again next week. Are you trusting him at all?
I wouldn't. The best running back on the field for Arizona last night was Andre Ellington. And I think that they would be better off going forward with him if they utilized him a little bit more in the running game, in the passing game. It's easier to switch things up when you have the same guy in on every play, and the defense can't predict what you're going to do. Offenses so often these days they go with the rushing back and the passing back. And it's easy for a defense to be like, okay, this guy's in, they're going to pass the ball, or they're probably going to pass the ball. If you've got a guy that you can switch things up with a little bit, like it makes it better for an offense. So
yeah. I think the problem with Ellington in that strategy is that we've seen him break down when he's getting a full workload. He's not a guy that's built to take a lot of carries, so
run him till he breaks down.
Yeah, I guess, but you want these guys to be healthy. You're already down David Johnson. You need somebody back there who has some talent. So I'd rather be able to mix him in for the rest of the season,
sign another guy,
and take a couple of 12 for 17 games from Chris Johnson. Well, you can mix in with the rest. I mean,
but 12
that's what
for
I would
17,
do.
What are you doing? You're gaining just over 1 yard a carry.
You're keeping your other guy fresh. I mean, you're gonna take. You can't. They can't all be winning plays in the NFL, right? You're gonna take some losses. So if you have 12 carries where you're not really gaining very much yardage, I think that's okay if you're gonna keep a guy healthy and who's able to be effective on the rest of his touches. That's my opinion. We'll see how it plays out.
Yep.
Dak Prescott looked good on the other side of the ball. Only threw 183 yards, but he did have 2 touchdowns and ran one in. Zeke Elliott, not a great day for him overall rushing the ball, but he did get a touchdown and he gets 80 yards. So, and he has 3 catches too. So I guess productive, but just not what we're used to seeing out of Zeke Elliott. Are you a little nervous about him?
I think that the worry is starting to settle in a little bit. I think that offensive line is not necessarily what it was a year ago. I know you used to say that Denver only got a backup offensive lineman from Dallas, but the pieces that have left that offensive line have seemed to make a difference. And Denver's rushing game has been pretty solid so far with Ronald Leary being in there. So it's...
Hey, I never said anything about him being a backup, by the way. That must have been Sal.
Listen, I'm going to have to dig up the tape on that one. But
you go ahead. I'm just saying I definitely was on record and supporting your thoughts that the Dallas Cowboy line was not going to be as good with the shuffled around pieces this year. So
I don't think you were against that. I think you were against the Denver line being improved by the addition of the Dallas offensive lineman. But that is not important at all right now.
Neither here nor there. Yeah. Let's continue on.
So yes, Ezekiel Elliott. I would be a little bit worried because he has not looked as good through 3 games he has played all season. And of course, one of those games was against Denver's extraordinary defense, but he has not looked like Ezekiel Elliott this year. So he did get the touchdown last week, and that made up for his fantasy production a little bit, but I would be a little concerned. I think in a dynasty format, you're not worried as much. You've got him for a few years, but he just might not return the first round value if that's where you drafted him. Of course, when most drafts were going on, he might have been slipping to the second round, so it might not hurt as much, but you hold on to him. he's got all of the volume. He's got all of the opportunity on that team. I think better days are ahead for him. So I wouldn't be as concerned where I'd be looking to move him by any means.
Yeah, Arizona's a tough defense, and Denver's a tough defense, and they clearly have both keyed on Elliott. So, and he still gets you 80 yards and a touchdown. So, I agree with you. Definitely better days are ahead. But I'm a little nervous, and the legal stuff is still pending. So that makes me a little nervous too. I certainly wouldn't be trying to trade for Elliott right now, unless someone's really panicking.
After everything that's going on, I would be so surprised if he ended up being suspended towards the end of the year. I think it's something that drags out throughout this football season and maybe impacts next year. But yeah, you're right.
It's the most likely scenario. I'm just saying it's
still something. It's something you have to think about for sure.
So as we transition into news here, one of the things news items that I wanted to bring up was the Arizona. John Brown actually warmed up before this game, even though he hadn't practiced all week, but then didn't play. But that might mean that he's a little hopeful, they're hopeful that he might be able to play this next week. Are you at all interested in John Brown anymore? I have to be, because I have so much stock of him. It's not even funny. But so I'm literally I have to root for him. But what about you?
I mean, I've got him on my falafel team, and after Cooper Kupp put up a measly 2.7 last week, and basically cost me my falafel matchup. Yeah, I am waiting for John Brown to return. I'm hoping that he can get healthy. He can sustain a few weeks of production in that offense that seems to like to throw the ball. I would love to see him come back, because we've seen what he can do when he's healthy, but he cannot seem to stay on the field, and that is the biggest problem. So, yeah, I'm absolutely keeping an ear towards that news. You want to get him, if you can, and at least put him on your bench, because like I said, we've seen what he can do. So yeah, I'm interested. I want him to come back. I would love to see him come back and complement Larry Fitzgerald, and we just have to wait and see. You never know. This injury of his seems to be, he comes back for a couple games and then he's out for a couple games. So I just want to see him come back, and I want to see him produce.
So where I have the most shares of John Brown, I think it would be in all of my best ball tournaments on the draft app. I'm not sure about you, but I took him in just about every single one of them, particularly as his value started to drop closer to the season. So, and he still wasn't practicing. So I got him in late in a lot of places. I'll tell you right now, of the looks like 17 best ball drafts that I did, I am not in great shape in a lot of them. So how are you looking, Steve, on the draft app?
I would say I'm about half and half, which is 50% of 75 drafts is not too bad. But the best thing about the draft app is that they interact with you throughout the season. They're paying attention throughout the season. They're seeing what happens each and every Sunday. Just this last week, I'm sure anyone that had Golden Tate on their team or Matthew Stafford on their team that lost by a very slim margin were heartbroken. But if you owned Golden Tate on your team and you lost by 6 points or less in a draft app contest, you're refunded your entry fee, because they care too. They want you to have fun while you're playing, and that's not fun when something like that happens. And ultimately, when something shouldn't have happened, where it almost that could have gone either way. So they were refunding everybody that had Golden Tate in their lineup that lost their matchup by 6 points or less. You got your money back.
Automatically too.
Exactly.
Not even, no questions asked. Like, people just woke up with money back in their account.
Exactly. So they are taking care of you. They're looking out for you. They want you to have fun throughout your football season. And, when you can draft a new team each and every week, when, you've got wide receivers like Amari Cooper and Kelvin Benjamin and Terrell Pryor and Tyrell Williams, like I have, in your best ball lineups, and they are just doing absolutely nothing for you, you can draft a new team each and every week. They've got contests for Monday, Thursdays. They've got contests for Sundays only. They've got all kinds of stuff that you can do, and you can win money. And if something seems to break your heart, they're probably going to refund it. So it's great.
That's that's the third time this year in 3 weeks that they've done something like that. So that's pretty impressive. Each week they've given back a certain group of people money that they felt, was just had bad luck in fantasy, because we all know that bad luck happens in fantasy football. It's definitely a great app. You want to go to playdraft.com/falafel and deposit $10. They'll get you into a free tournament, or you can go on the iTunes or Google Play Store and you can download the app and you can use promo code falafel. When you deposit at least $10, they'll give you a free entry. So use the promo code falafel, get in there. We're in there. Like Steve said, lots of different ways to win. I personally am getting really into these head-to-head tournaments where you can draft a new team every week and play one up against someone, and then if you win, you move on in a bracket style.
And no one gets your guy. No one gets your guy.
Right.
You have Todd Gurley. That guy doesn't get Todd Gurley. He goes off for 30 points. It's all yours.
But you have to bring him up. That's why I lost last week. Thank you.
That was me.
It was nice.
I got 48 accounts on that app.
Anyway, get to playdraft.com/falafel and make sure you get in there, because it is a good time. Search for Steve. He will literally play against anyone and most likely lose. So, all right, Steve, we are going to continue on here. We're going to go through some of the news. Melvin Gordon says his injured knee is good. He left the game for a little while. Sounds like he wanted to come back in the game. He still had a pretty productive day, but it's not good. It's the knee that had microfracture surgery after his rookie season. It's not good. Are you worried about Melvin Gordon?
I'm not worried to the point of where I wouldn't start him in any matchup, but maybe to the point where I might try to see if I've got some room on my bench for Brandon Oliver. Maybe
Absolutely.
Look for, someone that you might be able to drop, someone who hasn't been productive for you, and add as backup before something bad happens. You never hope an injury on anybody. I definitely don't. I've got Melvin Gordon in multiple spots, so I would love to see him be just fine. But if you've got him, you need to kind of try and, secure that spot before anybody else does. So if you've got the space on your roster, I would definitely look to add Brandon Oliver. But you don't know. You take the player at his word. You hope they know their body best, and that he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, part of the key to Gordon is he's not the most efficient runner as far as yards per carry and things like that. So the volume needs to be there for him. So if he starts missing time here and there, it's really not going to be great for his value. Obviously, he still has serious touchdown upside. So I think I'm with you. I think Brandon Oliver, if you can stash him, it's probably not a bad idea to do at this point, but that's about it. Other than that, you kind of just hope and pray. All right, speaking of bad, Coach Adam Gase said he is fed up with the Dolphins' quote-unquote garbage offense. He literally referred to his own offense as garbage. Now, obviously, when you lose to the Jets, I think the only word to describe it is garbage.
Yeah.
But that's pretty strong.
Yeah, those are some pretty strong words, especially after they went into Los Angeles, I should say, and beat the Chargers. But yeah, they did have a stinker of a performance on Sunday. You lose to the Jets, that's never fun. So you hope that lights a fire under everybody. Jay Ajayi, you have to wonder, after his very lackluster performance on Sunday, if something in that knee is bothering him a little more than they are letting on. Hopefully not. But Jay Cutler's still getting in tune with this offense. You hope that gets better as the season goes on, but they don't want to have to wait for something like that. So
listen, I think when you have to make Jay Cutler throw the ball 44 times, the offense can be described as nothing except garbage. It's not going to work when you do that. They need to limit the number of times he throws the ball. If for nothing else, then he could just get fed up having to work so hard and quit. We know Jay Cutler's not the most stable dude, so I think they got to make sure they take that into consideration and try to get Ajayi the ball a little bit more. I know he was very ineffective, but against a defense that is just not very good this year, I was shocked by this one. So hopefully that will improve.
They're playing New Orleans next week, so their defense is not exactly known to be a tough opponent. Maybe
True.
Things will right themselves they are playing in the Dome. They are playing in New Orleans, so that is a tough place to play. But, the defense is not exactly known to stop people. So maybe everything will right itself after this week. He's just trying to light a fire up under that offense, and hopefully it comes to fruition because, Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry, Jay Cutler, as a streaming quarterback, they're all going to be heavily used this week. So I will definitely be looking for a bounce back from this offense.
Agreed. All right. Here's a couple of news items that are not related but have similar styles. So I'm gonna ask you which one of these, if either you care about. Andy Reid says Kareem Hunt is not going to have his workload scale back. Meanwhile, Chris Thompson, Jay Gruden is saying that he is not going to get an increased workload. So one guy's, both of these guys are going to stay pat with the workload that they're getting. Obviously, both are performing at a very high level. Do you care about either of those?
I mean, each of them, goddamn, they've both been great for the first 3 weeks of this NFL season. They've started from week 1 and they've produced each and every week. You've got something out of these guys. So, congrats to both of them. Kareem Hunt, I wouldn't expect his workload to be decreased at all. This is what Andy Reid does. He uses his running back like this, and Kareem Hunt is producing at a phenomenal rate. So why would you decrease that at all? Why would you do anything to change that up? As far as Chris Thompson, I think the biggest concern with him has been his injuries, like we talked about earlier. So if they can limit those and try to diminish that chance of him getting hurt, I think they would like to. But I would like to see what happens in a game where they are challenged a little bit more. I know Chris Thompson has produced each week so far, but in this last game, had Oakland pushed them a little bit more, I think that he would even have done more than what he did, which would have propelled me to a falafel win. Brooksy, you're lucky. You're lucky that Chris Thompson got tripped up at the 8-yard line and didn't score that touchdown, or it would have beat you. But, yeah, I would like to see what his production looks like in a game where it's actually tight, close, where they might be trailing, but have an opportunity to come back. So, you have to take it in consideration, but each and every week is different, and each and every week is fluid. So with the running back situation the way that it is in Washington, you can't tell. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be utilized.
All right. Yeah, I agree with you there. So over in New York, it looks like Matt Forte might be a little more hurt than he expected, or at least it seems that way, by the Jets bringing in a couple of different running backs for workouts, Travaris Cadet being one of them. Is anyone actually playing Matt Forte anymore?
I know someone that played Matt Forte last week.
Was it in a 16-team league?
It might have been.
Yeah, so anyone in regular size leagues playing Matt Forte still?
You'd hope not, but
yeah.
Knowing that he might be injured or he might be dealing with an injury that is a little more significant than the Jets are letting on does make Bilal Powell owners a little more happy, such as myself. I am one of those people. He is not.
You're happy when guys get injured? That's what you're saying?
I'm not happy when people get injured, but I'm happy when opportunities open up for other people that might be on my team. Got it?
We've heard this from you before about the being happy about injuries.
I'm not happy
so
about
strange
anyone
to me.
Getting injured.
I don't know why you would wish someone bad things. I just don't. I don't get it. But it's okay. Bad things will happen to you at some point, Steve. So and then
Listen.
All right. Well, we're gonna move along.
30 years old. Lots of bad things have happened to me.
You can't spend a lot of times on the Jets running backs. I just thought that was interesting that they're bringing in people.
Powell is in for better days.
All right. Dwayne Brown is the Texans left tackle who was on a holdout.
We had to move on for this.
I'm sorry, what?
We had to move on for this.
Yeah. Listen, you guys give me crap about this all the time. How little impact the tackles being out has.
Listen.
And then you saw what happened last year with Lane Johnson.
Exactly. I was just going to say Lane Johnson last year taught me a lesson.
Yeah, so let's put a little more stock in this. And I can tell you, being at the Patriots game firsthand this weekend, I can tell you that the Texans' offensive line does not look good without him.
Yeah.
And if you can give Deshaun Watson a little bit more time, the guy's making plays with his legs.
He looks good.
And he looks a lot better than I expected from a kid that's that young and inexperienced. So you give him a good, solid left tackle. If this guy actually comes back, I think they're gonna be a competitive, very competitive team down the stretch here. But unfortunately, it sounds like he's not coming back. So, obviously he'll show up around week 8 because I think that's when he loses the service year, by standards of the contract. So, but not having this guy is definitely affecting them. It's impacting Lamar Miller and Deonta Foreman. So just keep an eye on him because if he does comes back, I think that you're going to get a little bit of a boost to all those guys. So maybe if you can acquire any of them on the cheap right now or prior to week 8, it might be a good time to do that. I know a lot of people are not buying Lamar Miller stock right now, but I'm suggesting that in a couple weeks you may want to see how low the value is and throw some feelers out there.
I'll just say right now in Pigs 2, a long time ago, you might not remember this, but you offered Lamar Miller and about $40 to me for LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah.
And then you never sent the offer, and you backed out on it.
I did? Really?
Yeah. You're gone.
It's interesting to me. Are you sure it's me? Because I don't recall ever owning Lamar Miller in Pigs 2.
No. Well, no, you must have had some sort of trade deal going on with somebody else to acquire him.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to do was, yes, and I actually, now that you say that, I remember this. I was trying to sell one of my top tier quarterbacks. I believe it was Russell Wilson, and the deal was supposed to include something along the lines of a Roethlisberger, Lamar Miller, and some cash. And I was attempting to flip Lamar Miller over to you for LaShawn McCoy, thus getting Roethlisberger, McCoy, out of the deal. So yep. I think that was what I was working, and I believe the talk stalled because for one, you weren't interested, and for another, I couldn't get my other deal done. So
no, I agreed to it. Because you lowballed me, and I said no, I would need at least this much money, and then you said, all right, I'll get back to you, and then 4 months later, you're like, hey, do you want to join this other league?
Yep, so that sounds about right. All right. Well, listen, hey, if I can come up with Lamar Miller and $40, let's work that out. I can make that happen.
No thanks.
Oh, well. Maybe you should do it before week 8. Anyway, let's continue on. Darren Sproles is done for the year. He not only broke his arm, but he also tore his ACL. He is out.
Brutal.
Sad. Just brutal. Guy that was really effective, even as an older player in the league. He really just that's tough. It's tough for that offense who really needs him, considering they have no other running backs that have been very good this year.
I added Darren Sproles in Pigs 2 for $4.
Yeah.
And now he's
a good
gone.
Buy. And
now it's a waste of $4.
You should just be selling everyone. You should just be playing for next year.
Everyone
so if you want to
gets hurt.
You want to talk some deals? We can make that happen.
I've touched them. They will get hurt.
That's fine. Once they're on my team, they won't. And it'll be fine.
I'm a virus.
You are a virus. All right, but Wendell Smallwood is the guy that you want to own in that offense going forward, I believe, because Garrett Blount's going to be the guy that gets the carries, on first, second down, short yardage, those kind of things. He might have more of a touchdown upside. But to your point earlier about running backs that kind of give away the offense's plans, I think LeGarrette Blount is that guy because he is not catching passes. Obviously, I think Wendell Smallwood has the ability to be a 3-down back when needed. So, and of all of the guys, including Corey Clement on that offense, I think he's the only one that can.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. I think Smallwood is the most versatile back. I think he could do both. He could run between the tackles. He can catch the ball. But, I wouldn't say LeGarrette Blount couldn't catch the ball. He did have that one game where he had one catch on one target for 0 yards. Catch. He caught everything that was thrown to him. So,
yeah.
Don't go against that.
I guess I can't really argue that.
But Smallwood is the guy that I would want to own now on that team.
He has 68 receptions in 100 games, 103 games. He has 68 receptions.
He doesn't call the plays, all right?
LeGarrette Blount is not catching the ball. His most in a season was 15 on 25 targets. So I mean, it's not. He's not catching the ball.
No, he's not. He's not catching the ball. Wendell Smallwood, if you can get him, which you should be able to get him in any league size under 16, maybe 14, you should be trying to add him. He is going to be on an offense that seems to be able to move the ball at will. They've done a great job through the first 3 weeks.
Tackle.
Yeah, exactly. That left tackle, let me tell you. So I absolutely agree. But in a deeper league, like a 16-team league, Clement is definitely an option that you might want to stash away, especially if you've got a deeper bench, maybe a dynasty league. He's worth a flyer on. You could do worse.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I think there's always a chance that LeGarrette Blount gets cut from this team at some point in the year because he's just not effective or whatever. So I do agree with adding Clement, but I just think Smallwood's going to be the guy that's going to get see the most uptick with Sproles out. All right, Randall Cobb is back to practicing. He was out this week. What does that do to the value of the wide receivers in Green Bay? Obviously, I think Jordy Nelson is pretty much locked in when he's healthy as far as the wide receiver one, but we saw Devontae Adams get an uptick in the first game that Cobb left. And then last week it was Geronimo Allison that really saw huge production with Cobb being out. So with Cobb coming back in, I assume it's Allison that pretty much hits the bench, right?
Yeah, that would be who I think would take the biggest hit. You don't necessarily think that Cobb will come back in and just demand the workload that he had week 1 when he had so many targets, but you think Allison would take the biggest hit. Adams might take a little bit of a dip, but not as much as maybe next week if Cobb comes out of this game healthy, he will go into next week and demand even more of a target share. I think that this is the Cobb that we saw week 1 when he was healthy is the Cobb that we all expected to see the year that Nelson went out. So if he is healthy, he is going to play that slot role. He is going to get a lot of targets from Aaron Rodgers, and I think Adams is going to suffer from that. But I think you've got one more week of being able to start Adams before Cobb regains that initial role that we saw from him in week 1.
See, I would disagree with you a little bit, only in that I think that Adams and Cobb are going to kind of go back and forth all season long. I think there's going to be games where Cobb's the number 2 and gets the volume, and then there's going to be games where Adams is the number 2 and gets the volume.
Yeah,
and that makes it a little tougher for me to decipher between the two of them week to week. But I think you're going to roll both of those guys out there because there's also a chance that there's a floor for each of them because that offense just passes so much. So speaking of that same offense, Ty Montgomery was upgraded to a full practice today, which is good because Ty Montgomery has been phenomenal this season, and it is there are a lot of teams relying on him. So definitely good to see that. All right. We talked a little bit about the Eagles' backfield, and I forgot to mention that Kenyon Barner was signed to a 1-year contract. So keep that in mind. He was a guy that was on their roster a couple of years ago in 2015 and 16. So, just another guy that could come in there and steal some of those carries. And finally, Jarvis Landry was no charges were filed in his domestic battery case. So looks like that's going to be closed. Who knows what the NFL will do, but it looks like he should have escaped, suspension because there's no charges filed. His significant other came out and said that there was nothing to see. So you'd be surprised if he got a suspension at this point.
Yeah, well, there were also no charges filed in Zeke's case either. So I wouldn't say that so far.
Agreed.
But,
agreed.
Yeah, as soon as this all came out into the news for Jarvis Landry, we saw on Twitter someone put out a statement on behalf of the woman involved saying that there was nothing to this. Was not a case, but you never know. This stuff's going to be investigated. I wouldn't think that there's anything that is going to come of this, but you can't be so sure anymore. You can't.
Nope.
you never know. So
That is very
hopefully,
true.
if that is the case, it's all put behind. They can get that settled on their own, and I don't know. I don't know what to say about this stuff anymore.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what the NFL is going to do at this point with anyone. So, uh, you know, we'll have to stay tuned, I guess. But it looks like he's in the clear, at least for now. That's about it for the news, Steve. I want to ask you, as we, before we wrap up here, we talked a little bit about some of the people that you would be adding in waivers this week. But who's your number one guy if you have to pick someone?
If I had to pick one person right now to pick, it would be Sterling Shepard. He was mentioned in an article, our waiver article, the Pawn Shop put out by Jason Donio, which I believe is his last name. He doesn't know, so that's
We're not sure.
That's what he told me. So,
It could be Dondon, because I think that he uses that sometimes.
Yeah,
but
exactly. So it's One Little Indian on Twitter, I believe. That might not even be his Twitter name. Who knows?
Yeah, we're not sure.
Exactly. But he writes an article for us, the Pawn Shop, and Sterling Shepard. He's only 34.3% owned. He makes a pretty good case that his role on that offense is a little more solid than Brandon Marshall's. And he's got 7 catches in 2 of his first 3 games. He scored a big touchdown in this last week. And I think that he might be somebody that you can add to your bench, especially in a PPR league, that might be able to help your team if some of your other wide receivers are taking a dump like a lot of mine have. And so he'd be my number one guy. But another New York Giant would be Evan Ingram, who finds himself in a PPR league as tight end 11, only owned in 18% of leagues. He's got a help from some touchdowns the first couple of weeks of the year, but he seems like somebody that is going to be utilized in this offense throughout the season. I think that you'd be smart to add him as a deep league stash right now, and you might be able to utilize him more than a Hunter Henry throughout the season.
All right, and a couple of guys for me from a dynasty perspective. If you're playing in dynasty leagues, we talked about the fact that you really got to take stock of your team and decide where you're going, whether you want to make some moves for the future. But 2 guys that might help you even this year and also will be good investments for the future. Matt Breida, running back from the San Francisco 49ers.
Yep.
He obviously is now the backup to Carlos Hyde in San Francisco. He's the clear handcuff there. But even if you don't have Carlos Hyde, I think he's a guy that you might want to take a stab on, throw him on the end of your roster, because we know that Hyde is a guy that could get injured, and we know that Kyle Shanahan loves to use the running backs in both obviously on the ground, but obviously in the running game as well, or in the passing game as well. So Braid is a guy that I think could have some value, particularly if Hyde goes down. But even if he doesn't, he may get worked in more as the season goes along just to keep Hyde fresh. So he's one guy. And the other guy is a tight end, Jonnu Smith, at Tennessee Titans. He's obviously behind Delanie Walker. Delanie Walker is clearly the guy there, but Jonnu's the guy that I would take a flyer on because he's caught 2 touchdowns in 2 games, not getting a lot of volume. I think he's only had 4 targets in those 2 games, or 5 targets in those 2 games. But he is a guy that is big. He can catch. They're using him in the red zone, which means they trust him. And if anything were to happen to Delanie Walker, I think he could see a significant amount of volume on an offense that has thrown over 100 targets per season over the last 3 years to the tight end position. So Jonnu Smith is a guy that I would take a flyer on as well. And if you were in a very, very deep league, Jalen Strong recently signed by the Jacksonville Jaguars after he got cut from Houston Texans. He's a guy that had a lot of talent coming out of college. I don't know if he's ever going to put it all together, but he certainly could. And if you have a deep roster and you have a spot, or a guy that got injured and you have an open roster spot, you could take a chance on him, because Jacksonville obviously needs some wide receiver help. So those are a couple guys that I would take. And with that, why don't we get to the finishing thoughts for the night?
False. I've got 2 more people. Just real quick.
What?
2 more people.
You're not allowed. Who said you were allowed to have 2 more?
I'm sorry. I'm taking control. Kobe Fleener finds himself as tight end 7 after 3 weeks of this football season, only owned in 38.6% of leagues. He's facing Miami next week, who is 25th.
Fleener.
Yeah, Flina only facing Miami, 25th against tight ends. They've allowed 15 receptions to the position after only 2 weeks. So he might be somebody you want to get in your lineup. And then Alvin Kamara, he also in a PPR league, he is RB 31, only owned in 11.9% of leagues. Adrian Peterson does not seem to fit in that offense at all. So if you want to add him as a deep, speculative ad, I wouldn't have any problem with that. I think that is a smart move and could help you out going forward throughout the season. I think one of these running backs get traded throughout the year, and probably that's going to be Peterson.
Mm-hmm. Or cut. You should just cut him.
Or cut. Yeah. I mean,
it
doesn't make sense the three of them being moved or used like this. So yeah, it could
weird.
happen.
Who said that at the beginning? If I could just put my finger on who thought he wasn't going to be effective in that offense.
I don't know.
Earlier in this,
I definitely had Mark Ingram as an RB borderline one.
Yeah, I think I did too. Someone was telling us that Peterson would be though, wouldn't?
I don't remember who that was. I really don't.
Yeah, well, we'll have to dig through the tape on that one. But in the meantime, why don't you now get to your finishing thoughts?
All right. Thank you guys for checking out this episode of the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast. You can check us out on Twitter at Falafel House. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Just follow Falafel House anywhere you can find them. FalafelHouse.com. That's where you can find our Week 4 rankings. You can find waiver ads right now. And you can also find streamers of the week, and then we'll have betting articles. We'll have Sal's Sink or Swim, since he's not here to promote that. And, that's all we got. All things falafel. Go, Kev.
You do that so much better than either of us, so either Sal or I. So I appreciate that. I will say that. And I just want to remind everyone that we do need some reviews. So if you could head over to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We take that feedback to heart, and then we beat Steve when things are bad. So if you could do that, that would be very helpful to us. And also remember to add a little charity into your into your fantasy experience, as Scott Fish has taught us through his many formats. FantasyCares.net may not be going strong or maybe done for this season, but you can always add a little bit of charity into your experience by donating a league fee or taking some of your winnings and putting it towards some charity. So there's a lot you can do. Make sure you try to do that. We will be back again on Thursday night. I believe it will be all three of us.
I think so. I'll be here.
Well, I will be here. So unless Sal has officially been recruited by Matthew Berry at this point, all three of us will be here. That will be released on Friday for most of you. And until then, Steve, hit the button.
All right.